Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here bringing you all another Market Watch episode. So we're at a little bit of a weird standstill in the market right now, in between a whole bunch of different things. Everyone is waiting for the upcoming ban list, which will give everyone a better idea of what decks to pick up and invest in. Maximum Gold is bringing a ton of reprints in just over a month, which will obliterate the prices of a ton of pricier older cards. And with Phantom Rage and Genesis Impactors not coming out until the end of the year, all we can do right now is speculate about what decks will get even stronger as we approach the end of 2020. Now, despite this, there is still lots of smaller shifts happening on the market, with people trying to do whatever guesswork they can for the changes that are up ahead, and today we're going to be reviewing some of those changes so that you guys can be aware and act accordingly. Let's get started. So first up, let's take another look at Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. We just had the Megatins officially come out over the weekend, and initially it did look like we were going to see Dragoon tank down in price towards the $30 mark after being around $40 during the week leading up to its release. However, it wasn't long before we saw the price of Dragoon shoot right back up, and we're now seeing it sit at $45 a piece on TCG Player. We all know what Dragoon is at this point, but this could very well be partially due to the fact that a lot of people were underestimating just how strong of a card Dragoon is and what sort of impact it would have on the meta. It's something that a lot of different decks are going to be running and trying to splash in, and maybe some people are looking at it and now wanting to try it that maybe weren't paying too much attention to it before, and this increase in demand could partially be what has led to this increase in price. Another big issue with the Megatins is clumping, where people have found themselves pulling multiples of the same card within the same small batch of tins. I've seen online where people pull 3 Dragoons out of a single case, and yet other people pull 0. My friend Dustin at our local pulled 3 Appaloosas out of 1 tin, which was actually pretty insane. I think that because of this, while you have vendors that are opening tons of cases and they are working out to that average of 1 or 2 per case, a lot of average players who are maybe just opening like the 1 case, they aren't pulling their copies of Dragoon, so they have to buy them off of the secondary market, which is driving the prices upwards. And finally, there's the fact that a lot of the rest of the set just isn't retaining very much value. So many cards in the set are under $2 or so a piece, and we're seeing Dragoon, which sits atop the set, go up in price as vendors need to make back their money on their investment somewhere. So yeah, lots of factors contributing to this increase in the price of Dragoon. I don't think it's going to go too much higher at this point. I could maybe see it hitting $50 or so if the card just becomes that important of a piece of the meta, but realistically the card settles back to around the $40 to $42 mark within the next couple of weeks. Next up, let's look at Animadorned Archosaur, a key monster for the dinosaur deck that came out pretty recently in Eternity Code. This is a really key monster for the deck, allowing you to pop Baby Ceresaurus and trigger its effect in order to search for a copy of Double Evolution Pill, giving you access to Ultimate Conductor Tyranno or Overtext Quatless. Dinosaurs are a deck that have caught a lot of people's attention as a sort of anti-meta deck, a strategy that has the flexibility to go first and set up a decent board with a couple of interruptions, or go second and OTK your opponent with Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. With Sam from Team Samurai X1 winning the Remote Duel Invitational with the deck, as well as the deck getting a seemingly decent boost with the release of the Dogmatica cards in Rise of the Duelist, the deck is looking like a really solid contender for a meta slot moving forward. However, we do have to keep in mind that we have a ban list coming up, and I personally think that there's a really solid chance that we'll see some sort of hit to dinos on the list. I know that according to everyone's response to my banlist prediction video, no one seems to think that dinosaurs will get hit, or at the very least, very few people want or think that they need to be hit at all, but I still think that they will see some sort of hit, as the deck has been a viable strategy for the better part of the last couple of years, and it isn't tied to any upcoming product sales for the foreseeable future. Anyways, Archosaur is now up at $41 a piece, up from the $30 to $35 price tag that we saw it sitting at before. If you aren't planning on playing dinos, I personally would be selling these off, because if the deck is hit on the ban list, we can definitely expect Archosaurs to tank back down to around the $20 mark. Admittedly, if they aren't hit, we'll probably see them bump up to around $50 or so right off the bat, but I personally prefer to err on the side of caution, and selling them off early is definitely the safer route. Next up, kind of a random card to talk about here, it is Chaos Scepter Blast. So this card just has the 1 printing out of Duelist Saga, and technically it is support for the Dark Magician of Chaos theme, which is kind of cool. However, this card is also neat in that it is an out to Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. if you control a level 8 or higher spellcaster, you get to banish a card on the field without targeting the card, which is pretty useful utility to have access to. It also just so happens that Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis and Dogmatika Maximus are level 8 spellcasters, so technically you could play this card as a tech in your Dogmatika deck as a form of spot removal, helping to out problem cards like Dragoon or Mystic Mine. Obviously, it does have the really big downside of only being usable while you control Fleur-de-Lis or Maximus, so it can definitely be a dead draw at times. Overall, I don't think that this is a card that's really going to see too much meta play, but it is a really cute little tech, and we are currently seeing it up at the $2 mark, whereas I think that most people still think of this card as bulk. So even though the chances of it seeing meta play are pretty slim, it's still a card that I would be digging out of my bulk, or maybe trying to set aside as a throw-in when you're pulling off some trades, especially because it has the added bonus of potentially being viewed as a collector piece for Dark Magician players in the future. Next up, Marincess Pascalus is a card that I didn't think I'd ever be covering on Market Watch. This is a super rare Marincess card out of Ignition Assault that I think is pretty good for the Marincess archetype, allowing you to summon another Marincess monster out of your hand when it is normal or special summoned. You also get to banish it from your graveyard except for the turn that it's sent there to add back a Marincess spell or trap from your graveyard to your hand. So as good as this card is, Marincess is a deck that has kind of flopped and not really done anything. It was supposed to be like the new water version of Salamangreat and had lots of potential, but the fact that the deck got absolutely destroyed by a single kaiju kind of put a cap on just how well the deck could perform at the competitive level. However, we did see a buyout of Pascalus over the weekend, the reason being that all of the other Marincess cards were reprinted in the 2020 Megatins, including the more expensive pieces in Blue Tang and Coral Anemone. Pascalus is kind of like the last piece that people need in order to play the deck, and with the rest of the core now being so much more affordable, people tried buying out the Pascalus early, expecting an increase in demand from here on out. That being said, Pascalus is a great card for you guys to be digging out of your hollow bulk and trying to sell off soon, while there's still some demand for the Marincess cards as people are tearing open the Megatins and looking to finish off the core. The Marincess deck still isn't going to be good or meta relevant, and I don't think it will be anytime soon unless they release some sort of crazy broken Marincess support or something like that in the near future. I feel like you guys should definitely be taking advantage of the hype to move a card that will likely settle back down to $1 or so over the next month. So another random one, but ultra rare Closed Forest, which I believe came out way back in 2010 in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds video game, is now all the way up at $35 lowest for a near mint copy on TCG Player at the moment. Apparently, this card is being hyped up for Melfi, as Melfi are a beast archetype, and this card boosts the attack power of your beast monsters by 100 for each monster in your graveyard. It is really cool though, in that it prevents field spells from being activated while it's on the field, and it also prevents field spells from being activated in the turn in which it is destroyed. It can be a pretty solid counter to a couple of meta-relevant cards in Magical Meltdown and Mystic Mine, so that's a pretty neat trick that Melfi do have access to. However, Closed Forest does have a couple of lower rarity common printings, so I don't really know why you would want to spend $35 on an ultra rare Closed Forest when you can buy commons for less than $1 or so. I mean, really, you're playing Melfi. Most of the Melfi archetype is commons. Who are you trying to impress with your blinged out Melfi deck? Like, that's the same as buying Turbo Pack Super Rescue Cats for this deck when you could play the commons or even the Duelist Saga Ultras. I do think that this price will settle back down eventually. It'll just take a little bit longer because as an old video game promo, there are only so many quantities available for sale on the market. But if you can get some value for any copies of Ultra Rare Closed Forest that maybe you've been sitting on for quite some time, I would go ahead and move them now while you have the chance and they're kind of at their peak. Next up, Superdreadnought Rail Cannon Juggernaut Liebe is a card that has seen a fair amount of hype over the last 6 months to a year or so. At first it was hyped up because of how trains were seeing a lot of hype as an engine, especially alongside Infinitrack Anchor Drill, and how you could bring out the card really easily by going into Gustav Max. And then after that it saw some more play in Eldritch, as Eldritch is a level 10 monster and you could somewhat easily bring out 2 of them to overlay into Gustav Max and then go into Liebe. This wasn't an extremely common occurrence or anything like that, but this was back in the early days of Eldritch before we saw the use of the Synchro engine alongside it, where they had a ton of open extra deck space, so you played the copies of Liebe and Gustav Max to have the option available. Now, we were seeing the card up at $40 or so, and it was trending around the $35 mark for quite some time. However, we just recently got news about Legendary Duelist Season 2 and how we are going to be getting cards from White Dragon Abyss and Sisters of the Rose reprinted in that set, which means that we should expect the original cards from those sets to tank in price. Collector's cards will still retain some value as the original print. So maybe cards like Bingo Machine Go or Blue Eyes Solid Dragon will be okay because they are the original versions. However, with cards like Liebe or Garden Rose Maiden, a lot of their value comes from the fact that the cards are used in the meta. So those cards having a reprint coming up will almost certainly cause their prices to tank in the interim as we get closer and closer to the reprint coming out. Just take a look at Millennium Eyes Restrict, which was up at like $50 to $60 before trending downwards and now being only a $10 card. Obviously, it's a little bit different because we saw Instant Fusion Limited as well, but the theory remains the same. If you're holding on to copies of Liebe, or even Garden Rose Maiden for that matter, and they're cards that you don't plan on using over the next couple of months, I would highly recommend selling off those cards sooner rather than later before they start to tank in value too much. Let's move on to looking at Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. So I don't know if you guys know, but every single version of Ash Blossom is above the $11 mark, including the commons from the Salamangreat structure deck, which is honestly pretty insane. This is a card that not only has the common printing, it has the dual Devastator ultra rare reprint, 2 other ultra versions, and then a super rare reprint as well. That is a lot of versions of the card for the cheapest version to still be in the double digits. I think that just kind of speaks to the versatility of the card, because I think that without question, Ash Blossom is kind of like the gold standard for hand traps. It's extremely versatile and it sees play in virtually every format. Even though right now a lot of people are looking at things like Impermanence and Gamma, Ash Blossom is still seeing a lot of play, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. It hits searches and draws, and because of how Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of always going to be a game that revolves around drawing and searching your key combo pieces, as long as that stays the same, Ash Blossom will continue to see play in the meta. Now that being said, I think that we should definitely be expecting Ash Blossom to receive a reprint in the upcoming Maximum Gold set, which I'm thinking is going to be a significant factor in helping to bring down the price of Ash. If you've seen gold rare Ash Blossoms from Japan, they actually look really amazing, and I think there's a good chance that if they're not short printed in Maximum Gold, we could see an immediate fallout of the prices of the lower rarity reprints like the common and dual Devastator prints. I think it's only the secret rare first edition copies as the original prints in highest rarity that are really safe right now. All the other versions will definitely have their prices similarly affected by the reprint, which is kind of why all of them are falling within that $11 to $12 range. If you're holding on to extra common copies of Ash or something like that for some reason, I would highly recommend selling them off. I think you should be keeping a set for yourself for your own use, because on the off chance that it is short printed, you'll still want to have your copies available as it is that really key staple card. However, I wouldn't want to be caught holding onto more copies than I need to with an expected reprint so near in the future that I would absolutely expect to tank the value of these lower rarities. Last but not least, guys, we have Psyframe Gear Gamma, and oddly enough, we're just talking about the rare version out of Toon Chaos here. So we just talked about Ash Blossom being the golden standard for hand traps, but despite this, Psyframe Gear Gamma is seeing a ton of play at the moment as well. It's an extremely versatile hand trap for when you're going second, able to negate any activated monster effect while also destroying the card, and not being able to have monsters on the field to activate this isn't really a concern on that first turn when you're going second. It does have the drawback of forcing you to run the vanilla brick in your main deck, but theoretically you aren't seeing it in your hand all too often, right? Now, I was a bit hesitant before about picking up too many copies of this card when they were under $1 each, because the rare version is effectively like a common from a set like Toon Chaos, and I thought we'd see the price stay under $1 for quite a while. However, apparently I underestimated the demand for Gamma, which is so significant that even though this card is so widely available, we're seeing the rare version push $1.50 per copy towards that $2 mark. Lesson learned, I think I would be trying to grab your playset for around $4 if you don't already have access to the card, because it is something that a lot of people are running in both the main and side deck, so I'd want to have your copies readily available to use. As for investing in this card, I'm still a bit hesitant to recommend picking up too many copies. It is still a low, non-holo rarity, right? So basically, if Gamma ever gets a widely accessible reprint again, this card won't really be worth anything. But if it doesn't get reprinted for quite some time, then I could definitely see this rare version moving towards the $3 mark. That call is up to you guys and how comfortable you feel with holding on to excess copies of Gamma. At the very least, I would recommend making sure that you have a set of the rares available for yourself to use sooner rather than later. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. It was a little bit all over the place today, but hopefully this catches you guys up on some of the key things that are happening with the market. There are a lot of factors running around right now that will make it a little bit difficult to look and see clearly what's going to happen next. But hopefully we'll get a ban list within the next couple of days, and that will push us in the right direction as we head towards the releases of Maximum Gold and Phantom Rage. Anyways guys, if you enjoyed today's Market Watch episode, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what else is going on with the market that maybe I didn't cover in today's video, so that I can hopefully cover it in a future episode and keep all of you guys as up to date as possible. And if you haven't already, make sure that you hit that subscribe button for all of the latest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.